There was nothing else at all in the whole world but football.
Hi guys, Simon here. Welcome to the FFF for another episode of the FFF Cinema, where Ollie and I had a chat this Tuesday night about the latest Netflix sports documentary, Pele. We started off the chat by discussing the difficulties of travel as of late. I incorrectly described The Last Dance as The Last Stand a few times, even after Ollie mentioned its correct title, and we worked out what was good about the new Pele documentary and what was missing. Hope you guys enjoy and take care.
Get on a plane,
Just
see what happens.
Yeah, and then just risk having to pay a £300 fine and being stuck in quarantine or whatever.
Oh no, it's more than that, dude. It's more than that, dude. There are certain, I can't remember what the exact conditions are, but you can get fined like 10 grand now.
What?
There were a couple who went to Dubai. Yeah, dude, a couple who went to Dubai and came back, and because I can't remember the exact rules, but they'd broken the rules. They got fined 10 grand.
Yeah.
It's like this new rule they introduced. So yeah, man, it's serious.
Wow.
Yeah, you don't want to get it wrong.
I read a couple of articles as well, because I think if you go on holiday, yeah, there's more sort of severe punishment for that. But I think if you well, that's the thing. Like, how do you sort of define and then use as a valid excuse that you're not going on holiday? Because you could just sort of say that if you were going on holiday or coming back from a holiday. So
I mean, yeah, it depends. Like, obviously there are valid reasons for travel, but I mean, yeah, unless you're like a doctor or like an important scientist, you probably don't need to be doing international travel, really. Like, right now.
You're just I live in Hawaii. Yeah, and coming back. So whereabouts in Hawaii do you live? You know, the one with the volcano. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So Pele. I mean,
Pele.
Did you know much about the footballer? Sort of before I'd asked you to watch this film.
To be honest, no, very little. I knew the name Pele. It was one of those names that you just sort of know, you know, it's just part of like culture or, you know, general sort of knowledge, history. It's just Pele, you know that name, but I didn't know anything about him beyond like he was a well-known footballer. Because I'm not much of a football fan, so yeah, it would make sense that I wouldn't know. But I mean, were you sort of quite aware of him and his background and stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Pele is, I suppose, he's like the holy grail of footballers, really. Before sort of the debate about Ronaldo and Messi in terms of like who's the greatest of all time or the greatest striker of all time, it used to be Pele and Maradona. That was the debate for who was the best ever striker. So, right. And yeah, I think I just, through sort of football magazines and from a young age, just Pele was everywhere. Pele was like, the king of football and regarded as the greatest footballer of all time.
He definitely seemed to have like transcended the sport. Like, I mean, particularly as, like I say, I'm not into football, but I've heard of him. Yeah. So he definitely seems like one of these guys that just became bigger than the sport.
Yeah. The reason why I do this this show really is just to kind of get, especially people that don't have as much of an interest of football like yourself, and just trying to get an idea as to what they think of these sort of typical football films. But I suppose like it's a real good one to start with Pele, because he is, like I said, he's essentially the king of football and he's such a large embodiment of football. So it's quite interesting to get your thoughts on how you perceived the documentary, how you perceived the film, how you perceived the man. Just your thoughts on it, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was definitely interesting to watch. I think that the main thing that struck me was that it would have been better as a series of episodes, however many episodes you want to do, because it felt like it just skimmed over so much in, it was 1 hour 48 minutes.
Yeah.
I know that because I watched it today. It's like, exactly, it skimmed over, like, it started 58, the first World Cup ended 1970.
Yeah,
basically the last World Cup he played in. So it's spanning 12 years in 1 hour 48 minutes, which is a lot. And I couldn't help thinking of like equivalents. Like, I recently watched The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls documentary. That was fascinating, really good watch. And that was like, I think 10 1 hour episodes, and probably spanned like a similar length of time. And that like went really in depth into all the different phases of the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan, and it worked really well like that. And so Pele, the documentary, definitely interesting, but it just felt like it skimmed over everything so quickly. I mean, we were texting as well about all the political kind of discourse that's in the movie as well. That's just touched on so lightly. And was obviously a big part of Pele's life, being this sort of big character from Brazil, and they just touched on it for like, I think, once or twice throughout the movie. So overall, definitely enjoyed it. Interesting. I know more about Pele than I did before watching it, but I don't know. I would have loved to just go into more detail in like episodes rather than just sort of just shy of 2 hours, I think.
Yeah. No, you bring up a big point, and one that is, I think, a lot of reviews that I've read more or less say exactly the same thing, that there's so much about the man, there's so much about the man that's interesting, and like you say, it sort of just skims over the surface of it, because there are some really interesting things about Pele, and this is where it could have been better as a bit more of a warts and all kind of documentary, where it really delves into the personality, because I don't really think we found out too much about Pele's personality. Most of it was just about his sporting achievements, and really just his sporting achievements alone. So it was
definitely. And even those, like, not loads of detail. It felt like it was like, okay, they played this game, they won it, they won that World Cup. 4 years later, they lost it. And it just, it was just skimming, even the sporting stuff, which was, the focus of the movie, even that was skimmed over a lot. Like, he didn't really talk about, I don't know, relationships with his coaches or his, like, I can't remember what the local team he played for was called.
Santos,
like, more details about his career there would have been super interesting to hear about.
It's interesting you say about relationships as well, because something that would have been, I think, would have worked better is to sort of do a bit more of a dive into his sort of psychology and his personal life as well. There wasn't enough about his personal life, and I think the truth is, and he actually mentioned it in the documentary, and that was what annoyed me and frustrated me, that the documentarians didn't probe further with it. Was, I think he brought it up, and he was sort of saying about how he has so many children that he doesn't even know exist, essentially, or that he's kind of had loads of affairs with women and ended up having illegitimate children with them. I think there's a question asked of him that sort of gets given his way, and then it's dropped, and like they move on past that. And it's like, for me, that just seems so odd. Like, why would you even sort of bring that up? And it was almost like, oh, here we go, and then on to the next subject. It's like, oh, you really missed the beat.
Totally agree, mate. Totally agree. I was going to say the same thing. And another one was, speaking about relationships, was I can't remember how many times he was married, but I think in the movie, in the doc, they were talking, FFF. But there was one, I think it was maybe his first wife, who was describing his relationship with her, and he said like something like how he didn't really feel any passion for her, he just viewed her as a friend. Something along those lines was the remark he made, which is like a pretty weird thing to say for someone you just married. I mean, maybe if you're like, I don't know, a couple of months into a new relationship and you're thinking about how it's going and you're like, actually, yeah, I'm not that into it, then it would make sense. But he's just married this woman and he's saying that, and it's like, yeah, there's definitely a story in there, or there's something going on, you know, in terms of his personal life that would be a great topic to dig into in the documentary. But like you say, it's just sort of, it was mentioned and then on to the next thing.
If you're enjoying the FFF Cinema, then you might enjoy our other podcasts. The FFF show is jam-packed with general football discussion. Under the Floodlights invites fans to talk about their favourite players and managers. The FFF Cinema is where guests and I review weird and wacky football films. And The Magic Of is a show which profiles special clubs from all over the world to find out all about their history, culture and fan base. I agree with what you were saying earlier about The Last Stand. It was an amazing piece of work, but perhaps one of the criticisms of The Last Stand is that Michael Jordan was perhaps a bit too involved, and you can sort of see that, because a lot of it was sort of aimed his way and there was a lot of positivity about Jordan. It almost felt like it was sort of tampered with and kind of structured to suit Jordan's narrative, really. I get the same sort of feeling about Pele. I get the feeling that Pele has sort of said, oh, don't ask that question, or don't go there, or don't go here. It's kind of like how much truth, or how much objectivity are we actually getting from this documentary?
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about in doing that, actually. You may well have done. But then it begs the question, I mean, why would the, you know, if the filmmakers wanted to go down the route of making not like an expose, but more of something that scrutinizes his life more, then I mean, why do you need to get his approval on it? You know, you could, you know, people make sort of investigative documentaries all the time that aren't flattering to the subjects they're looking at. They could have done something more along those lines, and if he wasn't happy with it, well, then I mean, it's his problem.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I mean, presumably he could have said, "Well, I'm not going to be interviewed for the documentary then," which would have taken out a good chunk of the content. But I mean, there's plenty of other people you can interview and ask questions about Pele.
Yeah,
so, I guess my point is, if they were struggling to get the film made without Pele kind of trying to influence it and micromanage the story, they could have just not had him involved as much.
Yeah, and it's essentially poor journalism as well, isn't it, really? If you're not, if you're kind of scared to crack any eggs or really get the truth, then, you know, that's kind of shame on the directors in a sense.
Exactly. Yeah, it does seem like they missed the trick, or there was a lot missing in terms of his personal life, for sure. But again, it comes back to just the length of the movie. It's like you can't fit that much into like just under 2 hours. So
no.
Yeah, I really, thinking about it, I really don't know why it didn't make it a series. Like it would have been way better as 5 to 10 episodes.
For me, the sort of length of the show is irrelevant as long as you get the balance correct. And I think this is, you know, I sort of brought up this point before, how Pele and Maradona, they're always sort of compared in terms of like who's the greatest footballer. It's always if you think of Pele, you can't think of you can't help but think of Maradona, and those two are really worth comparing, not just in the sense of football, but also because Maradona has a documentary as well. And with Maradona's documentary, I don't know if you've seen the Amy Winehouse documentary or Senna, which was so it's made by
definitely. I've seen Amy Winehouse. I don't think I've seen the Senna one. But,
so it's made by Asif Kapadia, and for me, I think the guy's one of the greatest ever documentary makers. I know I don't want to subject you to watching another football film because you're probably fed up of it. But if you do ever get time to watch Diego Maradona, I wholeheartedly recommend watching it, because
I'll check it out. Yeah.
What works well with the Maradona film is that I think it's probably shorter in length. So I think it's only an hour and a half, but you get this aspect of Maradona's sort of dealings with drugs and his dealings with, like, he's had so many affairs. You just see so much of the sort of negativity of his personality. You see so much of this, the troubles and the anguish that he suffered in his life. But then it doesn't feel too drab in that sense. It doesn't feel like the kind of, like you mentioned before, where you think, oh, do the directors or the documentary makers, do they need to sort of probe, and do they need to go too far? I think there is a way of doing it, way of probing without it feeling too much of a harsh investigation. You can, and this is where the Maradona film has done so well, is that it doesn't feel like this harsh investigation. It feels like a celebration, but at the same time, a lot of questions are being asked. I think that's where Maradona works so great, and I think that's essentially a trick that the Pele film really missed out.
Yeah, definitely sounds like. I guess it's like a documentary that takes a kind of character like this as a subject is basically like a portrait of that person, isn't it?
Mm.
And it's like that's what people watch it for, because you know the Pele or the Maradona that you've seen on TV and in interviews and playing football. The one you don't know is the one behind closed doors, like what they're like at home, what's going on in their private lives. That's the really interesting part. As sort of gossipy as it sounds, it's true, isn't it? I mean, that's the sort of stuff that's really interesting. And it just wasn't there in this documentary, which was a bit of a shame. But
yeah, that's, I mean, yeah, it's a really good point, because I think with any celebrity, like you say, let's say like Madonna or Bob Marley or just any sort of big name, Michael Jackson, just any massive celebrity, like you say, we listen to the songs, we've seen the posters, we've seen them, in concerts and on stadiums or whatever. But that's not really, like, we enjoy that and we love seeing that, but we want to see more, and we want to see more of the person. And I suppose it's maybe a case of like relating to it as well that makes us feel, or which kind of appeals to us as viewers, essentially. So
well, you mean like being able to relate more to the person,
to the individual, because I think we sort of put them on
makes them more human, doesn't it?
Like
totally.
Instead of putting them on such a pedestal and sort of looking at them essentially like gods, it kind of, I don't know if that's the weird thing as well. It's like it depends on the mentality of the person that's being subjected to that. So like the likes of Pele or the likes of Maradona, do they kind of want this this mystery, this illusion to carry on? Do they essentially want to be viewed all the time as a god, or are they happy to sort of come back down to the level of mere mortals, if it were?
Yeah, that's always an interesting thing with stuff like this, because it's always interesting to see how people how sort of defensive people get. So it's like, if you have a famous person who is well liked, and like you say, they want to maintain that status, it's always interesting to see how defensive they get when the difficult questions start getting asked. So like in this case, it would have been like asking Pele more about his various sort of children that he doesn't know about, and stuff like that. But I mean, it didn't get done in this film. They didn't ask him that stuff. But I think that's always an interesting aspect of these kind of documentaries, is like when it gets down to it, like how ready is the person to admit like their shortcomings, and not that they're just this kind of like sort of godlike person that's on posters and TV adverts and stuff.
It kind of reminds me as well, like I remember when I was about 16 and probably up until about 18, I was obsessed with WWE. I was obsessed with wrestling, and one of the things I really liked was these sort of wrestling documentaries. So you get these documentaries based on particular wrestlers, And at the time, I absolutely loved them. I ended up collecting so many of these DVDs. But it wasn't until I started educating myself more on, or feeling more educated when I was sort of entering into my later teens and growing up, I essentially realized that there was more to documentaries, there was more to films, there was more to reality, because the issue was with these sort of WWE documentaries was that they were produced by WWE, they're filmed by WWE, and they were completely controlled by WWE. So the narrative that was spun was more or less pure propaganda. So
Right, yeah.
I didn't.
But it's
Yeah,
basically like that. That sort of thing is basically like a promotional film for whatever it's looking at, isn't it? And I
yeah,
can totally see why something like the WWE
yeah,
would make those.
yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's when I started growing, I was like, "What the fuck was I watching that for?" Because it was just pure and utter promotional, positive, spun bullshit that really doesn't delve into any sort of form of reality or real aspects of humanity at all, and is really missing the trick. And then you start seeing, I think there's something that I'm really proud of being British for, is that I believe Brits make them the absolute best documentaries ever. Like, they're so incredible. If you compare a British documentary to an American one, it's like chalk and cheese. The British documentaries are just so in depth and to the point. And we've always, I don't know where it, maybe there must be like a sort of history timeline to where this spans back to, but there's always been a good sense of documentaries from England and from Britain where we just seem to get to the truth a lot better, and instead of sort of glossing over like our friends over the pond do.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just I think it's that thing of like the US style is like you say, is very much more polished and wanting to create a kind of narrative that fits into a feature length kind of time length. Whereas the British way is perhaps more just like filming what happens and that's the documentary, you know, was literally what happened rather than trying to manipulate it.
If you're interested in coming on the show for an Under the Floodlights special to talk about your favourite player or manager, please email the FFF2021@gmail.com or DM the FFF84 on Twitter. All contact details will be in the episode description. Hope you're all keeping safe, and thanks again for listening to the FFF.
It just seems like a really fascinating story that didn't really get shown in this film. Yeah, I wish they'd done it. Wish they'd done it as a series.
Just in terms of the documentary itself, this was something that I wanted to ask you. But what's your thoughts on talking heads in documentaries? Because for me, I'm not a big fan. I do think it's quite generic. I find it quite boring. That's essentially where I think my interest was kind of lost as well. And this is where I compare to that Diego Maradona documentary. There's not a single talking head interview in Diego Maradona, which is difficult, I think, to make a documentary like that. But it's possible that you can do it.
It is difficult, yeah. So how do they kind of structure it in that one then? Is it all like historical footage and like voiceover or?
Yeah, essentially it's that. Right. Yeah, it's just that, but it just works so well and it looks so beautiful and it feels so rhythmic and it flows really well. Whereas Pele, I think just seeing so many sort of talking heads interviews just makes it feel a bit generic, like I say, and just a bit uninteresting. And that's where
I definitely agree. I think the use of kind of talking head interviews is a kind of easy option, I think, for documentary making. There's definitely a place for them. And again, thinking back to The Last Stand, something like that, there's obviously loads of value in having like a talking head interview with Michael Jordan, you know, giving his perspective on now that he's 20 years or 25 years down the line from when it all happened.
Yeah.
but it is a kind of cop out, isn't it? If you're just relying on, you've got like a 2-hour movie and like half of it is talking head footage. It is a bit of a cop out.
Yeah.
And it is kind of indicative of them not having much else to lean back on.
Yeah.
Although one thing I did really like was all the historical footage. There was quite a lot of that. But I don't think it was used particularly well. It was kind of just in there as filler.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which like you'd have like a bunch of historical footage from, I don't know, the army in Rio doing some tearing down some buildings, or like football being played on a pitch. But then it would just be being voiced over by one of the talking head interviews, presumably just to break up having to see the actual talking head all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it seemed like they leaned on it a lot.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Just on the political sort of dictatorship issues throughout the film as well, because I think you mentioned it before, it kind of worked really well, I thought. But then again, they just sort of skimmed over it and didn't really go enough. Didn't go far enough with it, really.
Yeah, it seemed like there was so much interesting stuff to say. There was one bit where, in particular, where there was a guy comparing Pele to Muhammad Ali, because Ali refused the draft to go to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And Pele, I can't remember exactly what Pele did, but he either didn't refuse something, or he basically sort of cooperated with the dictatorship on something they'd asked him to do. And I think that the guy was saying like, the difference was that the only thing that would happen to Ali was that he'd go to prison, or be like put on trial. Whereas Pele in the dictatorship, if he didn't cooperate, could possibly just be disappeared. Like they'd take him off somewhere and kill him, and he disappeared. So that was why he cooperated. But yeah, man, like what a story! Like ask Pele about that. Spend like 15 minutes of the movie talking about that and interviewing, I don't know, finding the police that or the people in government that spoke to him about that at the time. But it was just glossed over, and like there were loads of big moments like that weren't talked about, and presumably like someone like Pele would have presumably loads of contact with the people in power, because he's like a commodity to them, isn't he? He's like a cultural export. They're putting him on like t-shirts and mugs probably and exporting it, and like he's just a cultural export from Brazil. So people in power would want to keep him happy and keep him close. So ask him about that. Like what happened there? What sort of dealings did he have with the dictatorship? I still don't know.
It kind of felt like they didn't know how to use it. It just felt like
totally
fuzzy backdrop, really. It just didn't really hit. It didn't land as well as it could have done, and that's it's kind of a shame.
And there were other moments as well, like there was one point, I think early on, where they were talking about kind of the change that happened when the dictatorship started, and how it was all fun and games, like sort of post-war still generation, like chilling out, having a great time, and then dictatorship started, and everything really changed. But the only thing, all that was mentioned around it was just talking heads saying everything changed at this point. No one really dug into it, and like that was they could have used the historical footage to really good effect at that point to, I don't know, somehow demonstrate the difference or show stuff that was happening. But I think I saw a couple of clips of like army guys walking around the city and maybe a tank as well, I think, and that was about it. So it was touched on so briefly, and that could have been some really interesting stuff, I think.
Rating out of 10?
I'm gonna go with, it's a tricky one, man. It is a tricky one.
Allow you to use halves if it helps.
I think I'll go with the 6.5.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to go for. So
because it was like, again, what I was thinking is like 5 is strictly average. It was definitely above average. I'm glad I watched it. It was interesting.
Better than the match.
Yeah. better than the match. But yeah, dude, it was just lacking so much, and I came out of it just feeling like I wish they'd just got in. I wish they'd done it as a series. Basically, that was my feeling afterwards, because there's so much more to know about that just wasn't covered. So yeah, 6.5.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I think that's a pretty apt rating to give it. Like you say, so much promise. Not a terrible film, not a terrible documentary, worth a watch if you've got the time for it. But yeah, it could be so much more. And my sort of giveaway, sort of takeaway from the whole film is, if you do want to watch a film of the greatest player of all time, don't watch this one. Watch the Diego Maradona one.
Nice. I'll be watching that next, I reckon. That one sounds good.
Thank you so much for listening to the Triple F. If you could please drop a like on our Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow us on Twitter, that would be massively appreciated. Hope you're all keeping safe, and thanks again for listening to the Triple F.